Welcome to the We Are VIP podcast. Each week, your host, Casey Hasten, Director of Recruiting at VIP, will bring you valuable insights from thought leaders, introduce you to incredible companies, and bring you tips for landing your dream job from our team of executive recruiters at VIP. And now, Casey Hasten.
Welcome to the We Are VIP podcast, a podcast devoted to adding value to your career or candidate search, brought to you by VIP. I'm your host, Casey Hasten. I'm an executive recruiter, director of recruiting with VIP, and your all-around hiring guru. And I am just so excited that you're here with me today because I think I'm going to bring a topic that a lot of us have questions about, because who all has done a year-end review and who all dreads it horribly. In fact, I just spoke with a friend of mine the other day that was heading into their year-end review and it just didn't go well. And why? Why do we do it that way? So today on the show, I'd like to welcome Noah Pusey, CEO of Ripple Analytics. His software is designed to replace the year-end review by providing real-time data on employee satisfaction and to drive overall growth. Ripple gathers feedback from your colleagues to measure and confirm levels of engagement, self-awareness, and culture. Thanks for joining us today, Noah.
Thanks for having me, Casey. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we are so glad that you are with us today and that you are kind of trailblazing on this path. You know, when we first started talking, I was just like, wow, everybody dreads the year-end review, right? But before we jump into that, I want you to tell us a little bit, and I'm going to say for one of the first times in this podcast, I'm a little embarrassed because I don't remember how we got connected.
I don't remember how we got connected either. I would imagine it's from a networking group, possibly.
Maybe. Frank Agan.
I don't know. Frank Agan is exactly who connected us.
He connects me with like 60% of the people that I talk to. He's amazing.
Yeah, and Frank is amazing, and he's got tremendous insight. I believe he's a recovering lawyer too, if memory serves.
He is.
That's where we connected immediately. I'm, as I just said, a recovering lawyer, and I'm just happy to be here to spread the word and to hopefully, drive some thought initiative with organizations that if they don't realize that it's a tortured event, they are probably experiencing it right now. And that's the annual review, the year-end review.
It's that time of year for sure.
And if you hate it, you should look at why you hate it. And if you hate it for certain reasons that you can change, then what are you waiting for?
Exactly. So I'm so glad we figured that out, and we figured it out in rapid time, And I love networking groups. And, it was interesting because just earlier today, there was a post that went out about the group that Frank formed called the Networking Hub, which if you don't know what that is, please check it out. It's just networking-hub.com. Just giving a quick shout out to Frank Agan because he's been so good to us here on the show about helping us, find great guests. And it's an amazing event. So I would encourage everybody to check that out. But now let's talk about you. So Noah, tell me about this Ripple Analytics and what sparked the creation of it.
Yeah, so Ripple has its origins in my time as a full-time practicing attorney, managing firms in the city, one in particular where we did the year-end review, when most year-end reviews are done in December. Most annual reviews are actually done in December, which, as everyone knows, is a chaotic point of anyone's annual life cycle in their professional capacities. You've got holiday parties, you've got client events, you've got shopping, you're trying to figure out if you're going to see family, friends for the holidays. The last thing that anyone should think would be productive is a 20-minute discussion with your direct reports during and amidst all of that chaos. So what we really did was harness the lack of appreciation for the annual review and try to figure out a solution. And when I was spitballing ideas with the co-founder of Ripple, Derek Hedges, we really just wanted to make a roadmap for the solution, because anyone involved in any kind of leadership capacity in corporate or organizational functionality, identifying the pain points is pretty easy. It's arriving at creative, productive solutions that is really, that's the chore. And so we wanted to make the heavy lifting not so heavy. We created Ripple to provide real-time, actionable feedback. Instead of talking with your colleagues, direct reports, the people on your team once a year, you talk to them whenever it's warranted throughout the year. The human brain only remembers things accurately for about 6 to 8 weeks. So that fact alone should call into question why anyone would think an annual process is effective when you're reviewing someone. Really, because it can be artificially inflated or deflated. If you're reviewing your direct reports in December and they crushed it in October and November, then they're going to have an artificially inflated review. If they crushed it January through June, but had a bit of a drop off in the last few months, then they're going to get artificially deflated. So we want to gather information, give facts, give feedback, give data to managers, owners, and leaders to make better decisions and have stronger, more effective communications throughout the year.
You know what? My mind, because I love watching true crime, went to like this totally different space when you were talking about that. And when you said that our mind only accurately remembers for 6 to 8 weeks, oh my God, what happens in all these, trials where they don't have them for years down the line? That is scary.
Well, it's scary, but the difference would be that in trials, you have the evidence that was collected at the time of the crime or the time of the wrongdoing that you can have custody of. And then if the trial's 3 years later, at least you have the data, the evidence from the crime. Whereas an annual review, you do not have many leaders that are copiously taking notes throughout the year where they're, creating the evidence to use in that annual review. So I would differentiate the process, just because if it takes 3 or 4 years to actually have the trial, at least you have accurate, genuine data on which to try that person. Whereas the annual review, I did it for years. You're just kind of shooting from the hip. And worse yet, it's almost always tied to the P&L of the company. So if the company has strong numbers, if they have increased revenue, if they had, a bunch of new clients and everyone's making money, then chances are most of those employees are, in the opinion of their managers and owners and leaders, doing great. Whereas what we try to do is give another set of data to managers, owners, leaders, and that is how people interact. And that's the basis of Ripple, how people impact each other that they work around and touch. And that's why our scoring system is called the Ripple Effect Score. We have, how you interact with someone is critical to not just your existence, but the existence of everyone that you're interacting with. And my generation, I think, understands the importance of feedback. The millennials and the Gen Zers, they expect feedback. They were raised on feedback. So the concept of telling a 27-year-old once a year, having a meaningful discussion once a year with a 27-year-old, they're going to look at you cross-eyed. When you start talking about March events, June events at the December annual review, they're going to wonder why you didn't talk to me in March about this. And plus or minus, like if you have a good event in March, why they're going to expect some form of acknowledgement of that success. And if you did a bad thing purportedly in March, they're going to want to know what they did wrong so they can, one, learn from it, or two, say, well, I don't think I did it wrong. I just did it differently than you did it. But have that discussion in March or April, not 7 months later, 8 months later, when the learning moment has long passed and that person can't grow professionally. You're in recruiting. People leave jobs because they don't think they have professional development. People leave jobs because their managers are ineffective. I hate the stat, but everyone uses it. 80+% of people that quit, they're quitting their managers, not their jobs. So if those are the facts, FACTS, and that's the data we have, to not implement strategy around those facts and data is not leadership, certainly. It's borderline negligence, corporate negligence, but it certainly isn't dynamic, insightful, enlightened leadership.
Well, and I couldn't agree with you more. And I think times have definitely changed. And I think we've seen a rapid change over the last couple of years with the pandemic and the way that people will tolerate being treated. For example, that's changed dramatically. And that's why we saw the Great Resignation. That's why we're seeing I mean, I can tell you, I gave this stat the other day, but I think this is really telling about how much people are not putting up with what they don't like anymore. So when I do a search in LinkedIn Recruiter, I can set so many different parameters. And for those of you that don't know this, you can't hide from a recruiter on LinkedIn Recruiter. We will find you because everybody is available. Even if you're not in our network, we can unlock your profile. So be careful what you put on LinkedIn is what I'm trying to say here. But it's interesting because I'll go and I'll set my parameters. And for this one particular search, I'd set just a couple of keywords. I was looking for somebody with an accounting degree with, 2 to 4 years experience that had been like a staff accountant, for example. That's not the exact search, but that's kind of what it was. And when I did that in the DFW area, okay? So when I did that search, I had 4,000 results. That's a lot. That's a lot to have to sift through. That takes hours. And so I wanted to, minimize it a little more. And so another thing that I look for as a recruiter is I look for people with tenure, right? So if you've been at your job less than a year, I don't want to pull you out of there because that's going to wreck your resume, right? And so I went and I set my little perimeter and I was like, don't show me anybody that's been in a company less than a year. Do you want to guess how far that dropped?
I would say it probably dropped 70%.
60%.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. I was like,
and
wow.
What's amazing about, so you use statistics, I'm sure, in your strategic approach to recruiting. I use statistics in terms of, the effectiveness of various platform strategy, and the leaders of today's organizations, if they're not using data and they're using gut reactions or, strategy based, a lot of times on unintentional bias, they're missing the boat on millennials and Gen Z expectations. They comprise those two generational workforces comprise 60% of the domestic laborers.
That's our workforce.
And the number's not getting smaller.
Right.
So, it's interesting. I was speaking with a colleague about the fact that they were looking at resumes and they saw all of these, 9-month stints here and 14-month stints there. And well, I don't want to hire those people.
You're going to have to.
I was like, what's the alternative? And the interesting thing about statistics and factual analysis and data is they represent 60% of the domestic workforce. And that number's only getting bigger. So are you going to reject that data? Are you going to deny the factual basis for that data? And if you do, then you're just putting your head in the sand because it's not getting any better. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to mention, when you mentioned the Great Resignation or whatever moniker you want to put on it, the concept of quiet quitting I find fascinating. Only because I've always seen clock punchers, people that do the bare minimum getting by in their jobs, and it frustrates the hell out of. It frustrated me, and now they serve as stories for selling Ripple in terms of you need it because these people have always existed. The people that take the job, they want to work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and they do the bare minimum to keep their job. They were called clock punchers back in the 90s and early 2000s, and they collected their check every 2 weeks. And anybody who was a go-getter, anyone who had stronger work ethic had to make up for them. So I think the emphasis on quiet quitting, I would argue, should be on who's quitting, because who's moving, who's being retained and who's leaving, because more often than not, the people that leave are the better employees.
Oh, for sure.
So if you're losing good employees, that means you're stuck with the clock puncher, quiet quitters who have less initiative, less work ethic, and you have to replace a good employee with another good employee to make up the difference. And I'm sure your clients know that's a very difficult exercise.
It is so difficult.
Do more to keep the good employees is the message.
Absolutely.
Don't let them leave.
And this bubbled up too. I have a client that I'm working with right now that has a very stringent interview process, and it takes about a month to get through the process. And I can't tell you how many times we get to the 11th hour and the other person's like, I got another job offer. And especially in this market.
And they probably got that job offer in 3 interviews.
If that. I mean, the clients...
You have to streamline the process. You can't, because that candidate, when I got my first job out of law school, I loved it. The second job out of law school, I didn't love it. I didn't love it for years before I actually did something about it, because I was raised by boomers where you put your head down and you work and you don't complain. I was making decent money out of law school. So, and I talked to my dad, and my dad's parents survived the Great Depression. So of course he was like, what are you, crazy? You're making good money. You got to stay there. I stayed years in a bad job with a bad leader and a bad boss. And then eventually I left and I was happier, but it took me years to get up the courage or I would imagine the strength to start my own company. But that's not the norm now. You have a 28-year-old who doesn't like his or their job.
They will quit without having a job.
Yeah. They won't come to work the next day.
Yeah.
I've had clients say, yeah, we lost a couple people, and I had to text them. I had to track them down because I was concerned that maybe something had happened. And they said, no, I wasn't feeling it, and I'm going to look for another job. When did that happen 20 years ago?
Exactly. Quitting without a 2-week notice, for sure.
Those are the challenges. And if you can implement solutions, and, at its heart, what Ripple is, it's an engagement tool. It's a tool to drive engagement, which we measure self-awareness. Self-aware employees are happier. They're more productive. They call in sick, 80% less absenteeism, all of those numbers that should drive any company, if not Ripple, to use some engagement platform, some employee talent, management, development, assessment platform, so that they can show their people that they want their feedback and then use it.
Yeah.
One of our fundamental messages is don't collect the feedback if you're just going to bury it. You got to do something with it, acknowledge it. And if everything's going great and your culture's strong, celebrate the success. That's more important today than ever. And not nitpicking on the blind spots or the weaknesses, but celebrating where people are doing the right thing and doing well, and patting them on the back. And, as an organization, knowing that the days of 20, 25 years ago where you had to critically analyze everybody that worked for you, it's okay to say, hey, good job, or hey, why'd you do it that way? Let me know. And giving them an anonymous platform is what we do, so that you can give and receive genuine feedback. It's not, your name's not attached to it.
Yeah. So what advantages have you personally observed with regards to businesses using Ripple Analytics?
There's more communication. The data, we crunch the data into a dashboard, and we believe, although, you don't have to, we believe all users should have access to their data. They should be able to see how they're doing. And then managers have access to the team data, and then leaders, owners have access to everybody. And what we've seen with our clients is they talk more. Managers have more discussions, meaningful discussions, not the weekly check-ins that are great at the beginning, but then turn into mandatory weekly check-ins. You should have communications when events warrant it. And if that's once every week, great. If it's once every week for a few weeks, and then it's once every 3 weeks for a 6-9 week period, react to when you need to have those discussions. And by tracking the data on Ripple, you can see peaks and valleys, and we call those communication events, where go talk to your person, your employee, because at the heart of every employee, every human capital talent is a person. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to personalize that experience so that it's not a 20-minute, static event once a year where you tell someone what they did good, bad, and everything in between for the last 12 months. That's in the rearview mirror. You can't truly learn from that. What you want to do is find out what's going on today that's going to impact today, tomorrow, and down the road, and build your strategy and solutions around those concepts rather than what you did over the last 12-month period.
One of the areas that I thought was so interesting as part of what you gather is your reflection summary. So tell me a little bit about that and about the intel that it provides.
So at the heart, what we were talking about earlier, engagement, self-awareness, culture, those are our three, banner points. Mm-hmm. Self-awareness can really only truly be measured if you give information about yourself. Your self-reflection survey is huge. You're answering the same questions. Ripple's based on survey analytics. We ask questions, 5 questions a month from your colleagues about you. Your self-survey, your self-reflection survey is you're answering all those questions about yourself. So then you take those two data sets and you say, okay, it's a 1 to 5 scoring model. So 1 never, 5 always. So one of the personality traits we track is curiosity. So if I think I'm 4.5 in curiosity and my colleagues think I'm a 3.6, that means I'm not very self-aware when it comes to my levels of curiosity. If, however, I think I'm a 4.2 and my colleagues think I'm a 4.1, that confirms I'm self-aware when it comes to curiosity. So when the manager looks at that data, they can see that Noah's naturally pretty self-aware when it comes to curiosity. Is that important in accounting departments? Not really. Is it important in a marketing department? Absolutely. Where curiosity, creativity, thinking outside the box is a very important component. So what we also do is we marry up the data to job function. So my example of the accounting firm, the accounting department, is if my accountants aren't super curious and super creative, I think I'm okay with that. But I do want them to be conscientious, which is attention to detail, making sure that specific things are done in specific moments, invoices are being followed up on, all that kind of stuff. That is something that I would want a high degree of self-awareness from my accountants. So we work with clients to look at the data, but also confirm that the data is relevant to their job function. And if it is, then it's important to really center on those data points.
So many people may come to the realization that they need to make some changes after reviewing their self-reflection or their reflection summary from the colleagues, because you said you do a self-reflection and a reflection from the colleagues. So what is the first step that they can do to take this initiative?
We're big on communication. Sit down and go through the data. One of the primary reasons we share data with all users, the individual data, is because we want users to be aware of their perceived reality in the workplace. So, if we're having a meaningful discussion and I'm blindsiding you with data that I collected for the last 6 months, and I say, Casey, you got this problem, you got this issue, you're okay here, it's not that different from an annual review. Instead, what happens is while that data is being collected, you as a user, every time you fill out surveys, you get to go back to your dashboard and see how you're doing and see what your numbers are showing. So if you're crushing your numbers, this is one of the barriers to entry we have with some organizations. It level sets the playing field, because a lot of times during the annual review, one of your primary goals, which is horrible to say, is to make sure the employee doesn't think he, she, they are that important, that you got to, limit their ability to leverage their position within the company. Because if you tell someone they're a rock star and then you give them a small raise and a small bonus, they're going to say, well, you just told me I'm a rock star, so there's a market for me. So what are you doing? So when you have those discussions with Ripple data, the Ripple user, the Rippler, knows how he, she, they are doing. And so the manager doesn't have to, sugarcoat it. And as important as having those discussions about poor data, it's equally, if not more important, to have those discussions about great data. So when you see someone's data is absolutely confirming that Noah, Casey, Doug, Nancy, they're rock stars, they're assets to the organization, guess what? You're gonna have to suck it up as an organizational leader and say, what the data shows you're a tremendous positive influence in our organization. We know you know it because you've been looking at the data for the last 6 months, 9 months, year and a half. What are you happy with, and what can I help you change? Because I don't want to lose you. Now, Doug, the guy that is slouching and just punching the clock and quiet quitting, that discussion's easier with Doug too, because guess what? Doug sees his dashboard. Doug sees his data. And when you say, Doug, you gotta right the ship here, man. You're not doing what we need you to do. You're a toxic influence in the office. If something doesn't change, we're gonna have to make a decision with respect to your future employment. Doug's not shocked because Doug sees the 6, 9, 12 months of data. So those difficult discussions that some managers avoid having, now you have the tool to leverage the organizational position to have those difficult discussions.
I could, and you're the lawyer, but I could also see this helping to avoid some lawsuits for wrongful termination.
100%. That's our last selling point. I don't like to lead with the lawsuit in our pitch, because obviously it's like, what? Lawsuits? What are you talking about? But yeah, there are people that exist in organizations that will think they're wrongfully terminated. Meanwhile, you have 2.5 years of data showing that they're a negative, toxic influence in the office. It has nothing to do with anything other than their poor co-working, and they're impacting my good people. And my good people are leaving because of the data-backed poor employee that I've allowed to exist. And finally, I got to do something about it. And when you get that letter from the employment attorney saying we believe there could be a wrongful termination, you can say, hey, listen, you want 2.5 years of data that backs up our termination? Send me your email. I mean, that's it is you nailed it. I mean, there is a peripheral benefit, not in the review, assessment, development space, but in the CYA of some of those difficult decisions that sometimes have to be made.
I could talk to you about this all day, and unfortunately we are almost out of time, but this is fascinating, and I know people are going to want to reach out to you. But before I let you give your information, you have to answer my VIP questions. Are you ready?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so quick, short answers, whatever comes top to mind first. So if you were chosen to be one of the first colonists on Mars, what 3 things or people would you take with you?
So colonists meaning we're going there for the first time. We haven't established stuff, so you need a doctor.
Okay.
I would think you need a doctor. I would say politicians, but that would be purely that would be a pure joke. Yeah. I would say some sort of engineer, construction, someone to build, and then I would say some sort of religious, philosophical leader to guide the development of community, the moral compass or integrity of the community we would be building.
Okay.
Those are the 3.
Okay.
I don't have,
There's no right or wrong answer. I just love to see.
It's a good question.
I love to see how people, like, they want to ask me follow-up questions, like, okay, or is it already established? Do we have water? Do we have? And I'm like, I don't know.
Right. Well, that was. I would want some form of drilling or water creation expert. But yeah, I mean, I think from a colonial initial colonization of another planet, I think those would be my 3.
Okay. What is one thing you do each morning to set your day up for success?
I get up when the alarm goes off and I make my bed. I don't hit snooze. I make my bed before I do anything else. Before I brush my teeth, before I take a shower, you accomplish something. And I know there's a general that talked about it at some Harvard speech years ago. I've been doing it for 30 years.
Wrote a book on it too.
Yep.
But the principles are good about why you should make your bed. So I'm going to
set your alarm on that note. Set your alarm for a time that you will get up. There are morning people and there are later morning people.
Yep.
If you want to set your alarm for 6 o'clock in the morning because you think that's when you should get up, but then you hit snooze 15 times,
don't do it.
You should probably be getting up at 7:05 and just get out of bed.
Yep. I will tell you though, a little funny story when it comes to bed making. I do make my bed every morning, and I'm like you. I like to do it as soon as I get up, but I only half make it. And let me explain. I make everything but one corner of the comforter because I have this little 5-pound Pomchi that likes to sleep under the covers. And so I leave it a corner unturned for her. I think that's fair.
That's nice. Yeah, that's nice.
So, okay, my final question for you. If your life story was being summarized in a news article, what would the headline be?
My life story. Farm boy lawyer wants to make the workplace a happier place to work. Mm-hmm. I grew up on a farm in Vermont with 7 siblings. My parents still live there. My parents didn't go to college, certainly didn't go to graduate school. So I went to undergrad, law school, realized that it wasn't, fulfilling that certain need in me, and pivoted. And so that would be the title of my article.
I love it. How do people find you? Because I know this is going to revolutionize the workplace.
Email me on my work email. Don't send it to info@Ripple Crew. Send it to Noah, NOAH at Ripple, RIPPLE crew.com, and I will get back to you within 24 hours. Awesome. I'm looking to help organizations. We are industry agnostic. We basically say if if you have an organization where you want your people to be happier, where they want to come to work because they enjoy the people they work with, where they might stay. Listen, the era of 30-year tenure at organizations is gone. So if you want your people to stay maybe 2 years, 2.5, 3 years instead of 9 months, create an environment that fosters that really develops it, and we can help you do that.
I love it. I know people are going to want this. I know as soon as Frank shared your profile with me, I was just like, I want to talk to this guy because I think he can help our people. So I love it. Thank you so much for coming on and spending time with us today, Noah. And I just have one last thing to say to you.
Sure.
You are a VIP.
Thanks, Casey.
And that's a wrap for today. Join us next week here on the We Are VIP podcast. We'd love to know how we can help you be a VIP. To find out more, log on to wearevip.com.